So there's nothing more frustrating for a software developer to create a masterpiece of a program and then watch users dismiss it with just a few seconds of their attention. And so we're going to see a presentation here from a CEO of a software company who has learned many experience rules for how to avoid being the best piece of software that no one uses. And so these are really principles of onboarding new customers. So part of this is principles of usability design, how to make your software obvious, and so that the best option is really the only option that your users have to pick from. So what we're trying to do is move a new customer from his zero state of not knowing anything about your program to a basic adopter so that he or she can use the program for most of what they need. And then, of course, we're going to turn them into experts sometime in the future. But for right now, we need to get them hooked and start from scratch. And so we're going to take a look at an inside view of this company called Gibraltar Software, and Kendall's going to show us about their flagship product called Loop. And so they have to take customers from zero knowledge to be able to test their software and their product and their service. And they've done a lot of analysis, big data analysis you might call, and see how that small changes to their website and to their sign-up process and to their onboarding makes a big difference in how that they can capture customers and turn them into paying customers. So this applies to new customers that are outside of your company. Also, it applies to software developers who are inside a company and they are forcing their software upon other users in the company. So we still need to get their buy-in and essentially get them as a customer. So let's see what Kendall has to say about what he's learned in his career as a software developer and how to onboard users.
There's a little bit of light towards me. Fine, cool. Right, so effective onboarding for fun and profit. So a little bit about myself. I'm Kendall Miller. I'm the CEO of Gibraltar Software. And this talk I'm going to give today about onboarding is really meant to open your eyes as developers to experiences you often don't put a lot of time into, which is how users initially start interacting with your software and systems to get up to the point where they are effective with them and the importance of that program. This is something that's really important to us because as a software company, a software vendor, if we can't get people to use our application to actually get through that initial curve, then basically it's as if we never wrote the system at all. And that's basically the default position you're in with pretty much any application you might have is if you create a brand new application, it's now the coolest thing that no user's ever seen or going to use. And you need to get people to the other side of that. So let's start with what is onboarding. What do we mean by onboarding someone into an application? So it starts with a couple fundamental challenges. And it's things that are different than maybe when you started with software. First off, nobody reads documentations or manuals anymore. They don't do it. We still create documentation for our products. About the only purpose that serves is when someone actually sends us a support case, I can refer them to a thing to say, see, we made some effort to tell you. That's about as much as that documentation really does, because people are not interested in that pre-research. And if you think about this, it's a change from like in the early days of software where people would slavishly go through manuals, understand things, and then start to interact with systems because they had no other choice. That was really the only way they were going to be able to successfully interact with those platforms at all. Secondly, potential users make judgments very quickly and will move on because the competitive landscape now that any software application is going into is steep. There really is no app that is someone's only choice. So if you're creating a new piece of software for somebody, it's replacing one or more tools that they already use and are familiar with. So you need to pretty quickly get over the hurdles so that they feel that the work to understand and use your tool is better than continuing to use the tool or tools that they already are comfortable with. And they're very quick to say, I forget that, and move on from your system. New users don't give you much time. They expect these systems to be obvious pretty much immediately, and if not, they don't want to adopt them. This is really challenging if you're a software developer in the team, though, because first off, you're an expert in your system. You know every inch, every in and out of it. You know why it is the way it is, why it does the things it does, what made it that way, every discussion, every course of action in history that got it there. You know all of the cool capabilities it has and why they are the way that they are. The problem is everyone else starts with knowing nothing. So they come instead with their preconceived notions of the way your software might work or should work, or how other systems approach similar problems, but they don't know the knowledge what you do. So you and your users are proceeding from fundamentally different viewpoints. You're inside the building and they're outside the building looking in, and you two of you can see the same thing but from completely different sides and miss each other. And what that really leads to is an unfortunate aspect of designing and building a lot of these systems is we spend a lot of our time, when we're doing incremental releases and new versions, creating some really great feature that has some amazing competitive value in how it does what it does. But that feature inevitably is so far into the system that for the vast majority of users will never find that thing. They'll never find it, even if it's the thing that they need to solve the problem that they have. And that tension between discoverability and ease of use and ease of adoption makes it very difficult to square those circles in the same user experience. So why do we need to worry about this even if we're in-house developers? So for example, we're a software company, it's pretty obvious why we have to worry about it. Gentlemen from Microsoft, pretty obvious why they have to worry about it. If their stuff's not usable, they don't get customers, they don't make money, bad things happen. But let's say you're a developer inside a corporation, or you're a consultant writing software for a company where that software is used internally. You might think, this doesn't apply to me. I don't need to worry about onboarding people to our systems. They have to use them. We've mandated, it's the time and accounting system. They must use it. Well, you'd think that, but it's not as easy as that. So first off, users could simply oppose migrating to your new solution. If you're replacing something and they don't like the way your new thing looks, because anything you build now pretty much is replacing something. Maybe they were using Excel spreadsheets for time accounting before, and now you're having them use a web app. If it doesn't feel better to them than those Excel spreadsheets, simpler or easier to use, they will find ways to oppose the migration into your new solution. They could also just reject your application and go find an external provider that provides those same services but does it on a SaaS basis and go that direction. I've absolutely seen this happen in corporations where an application was delivered by a team, it met the specs and the requirements, it passed testing. The internal feedback was it was hard to use. The team said, well, we don't ignore that, we don't care. Usability and user experience is not important. This is an internal application, we don't have time for that. And then what happened was 6 months later, they came around and said, well, why aren't people using this application? Discovered that, in fact, a whole division had just gone off and just bought an outside provider to do the same functionality, and it blown off the internal system. People don't have patience to keep using a terrible product over and over and over again. And even if they do keep using it, they can do other terrible things to slow you down. They can just keep badgering you with change requests or other nuisance things because it's too hard to use an action you can't really do anything with. So even if you're just talking about an internal product, user experience matters now. You can't get away with not doing something about it. And the start of that user experience is getting someone to initially adopt your application. So let's zoom into that challenge. Let's talk about how do you onboard new teams into a system. So let's look first at an industry that does this really well, that knows a lot about how to do this. And that's the software video game industry. They've learned a long time ago that nobody reads manuals, and the only way they're going to have you want to play that video game a lot and enjoy it and feel like you got value for your money and tell your friends and give it a good rating and sell a ton of copies is to make it easy to get to initial satisfaction and competency in that application. And how do they do it? With some simple principles. We're going to walk through an actual quick video game here. Here's Red Dead Redemption and the initial sequence for the console version of that they use to get you going with that application. And it starts off with, they don't send you through some tutorial out in the pasture. Nope, they have you learn to ride a horse in a snowstorm. Because they want the game to be visually interesting and indicative, but all they start you with is one thing. They just want you to hold X to match speed with another character. So they're trying to get you to just do one thing. I just want you to learn one behavior. And it's not a special behavior, it's a behavior you're going to use a lot. It's the first behavior I want you to learn. Once you've shown you can do that, cool. Now I'm going to show you if you tap that X instead, you get to go faster. So hold it, matches speed, taps it, goes faster, but same button. Not taxing anybody too much here, right? Next step, okay, cool. Use the right one to slow down. So you kind of go on the opposite side of the controller, use R1 to slow down. And once you've shown you can do that, now what have we done? We've shown that we can match speed, speed up, slow down, only 2 buttons in use. Now we make it a little more interesting. You can double tap and hold one thing while pushing another thing to move up in the formation. So now it's getting a little more complicated. They give you a minute to figure that one out. Once you've done that though, now you get a real reward. The thing the game is known for is its interactive storyline. So now that you've mastered a complicated 2-button maneuver, we're going to let you talk to Dutch, or to Micah. Yeah, talk to Micah, and then finally actually have a real conversation using the cues on the screen. And this begins the same set of controls, the controls you use throughout the game. But what did we do here? Well, we started with one thing and then built incrementally on it in small ways, and did it in a setting of the actual system so that you would enjoy interacting with the application all through that process. So what they're trying to do is get you from being a brand new user through this sort of novice to basic level of ability with the application in a fun way that you'll stay on board with. Now notice, even though we have a number of levels of experience you might have in a system, new, novel, basic, proficient, expert, we're not worried about getting people to expert. We're not even worried about getting really to proficient. We just want to get you from never used it before to basically capable of doing things with it. You can solve your core problems with that software application. And that's what we're dealing with onboarding. We just want to get you competent enough that you are meeting your needs in the application. Once you're there, then you might progress up, but there's a number of users that they'll never have a reason to get much beyond this. Maybe, for example, time accounting, once you can accomplish your weekly time accounting, you're done. You're not a manager, you don't have to sign up on other people's time, you don't do anything too clever, you don't need to deal with any of that stuff. Fantastic, you can stay right here. And other folks will want to work up the ladder, and that's fine too. But these folks are, once you're here, once they go this direction, they're already invested in your platform and in your application. There's great reasons to keep them happy, but frankly, you don't need to worry nearly so much about the user experience with them because they're already invested in your platform and figuring it out and understanding it. Your biggest risk is getting people from here to there. So let's think about another metaphor for this. To get from new to basic, we need to understand what is it that has the user to be motivated to want to even make that transition. And it's not good enough to say because they have to. They have to have another reason that they want to do this. What are they getting out of it? What's the change in their life that is brought about by getting from here to there? Well, let's think about, you want to get on board a cruise ship. You have a bunch of passengers here. We need to get these passengers on board the cruise to actually set sail and leave port. To do that, you can think of it on one hand as all I have to do is take these people and their stuff, get them checked in, get their stuff to their stateroom, get them to the stateroom. I now have them on board. I know who is on the ship. They're in the right places we can go. But that's not how cruise lines look at it at all, because they know that you didn't just get on board a ship because you like the experience of boarding ships. You got on board a ship for a reason. In particular, getting on board a ship or a cruise ship is about starting your vacation. It's onboarding you to your vacation. Now, for somebody, that might mean I'm ready for my vacation when I know where I'm going to go for dinner, I know what activities I'm going to do this week in the cruise, and I know what outfits I'm going to wear. For someone else, it could be I know where the bars are, I know where the pools are, and that's what I want to interact with on my vacation. Someone else could just simply be, I know where my stateroom is, and I already brought 2 books with me, and I just want to be left alone. And so as soon as I can open the veranda and just look out, I'm happy. Each person's got a different thing. The cruise itself works hard to get you prepped for that, to make sure that by the time they leave port or in motion, you're set for your vacation. Because they want you to have a great vacation. Why? So you'll buy another cruise. That's what they need. Most of their business is repeat business. Now, applications are the same kind of thing. We can't look at it just from a technical standpoint of what's it mean to onboard a user to our application. We have to start from the understanding why a user would want to do that in the first place. So let's look at some examples. So Twitter. What does Twitter do? Well, You post short messages to the internet with Twitter, right? That's what it lets me do. But what's it mean that I can do that? Well, I can see what's happening in the world right now, good and bad. So this is what the software technically does, but this is what it means to have that ability. Facebook. What does it do? Well, I can see posts and pictures from people I kind of sort of almost knew and remember from high school, right? And my family. Well, what's it mean? It means I can connect with friends in the world around me. That's why we even do it. Azure DevOps. Let me get out of social media for a minute. Let's talk about Azure DevOps. What does Azure DevOps do? Well, I can store source code, track work items, build apps, and automate deployments with it. That's what it does. But why do I care? Because I can plan smarter, collaborate better, and ship faster with a set of modern development services.
You can pay him later for this.
Now, our flagship product, Loop, a logo that normally shows up nicely on screen. What's it do? It's centralized logging and error tracking, which I am going to fully acknowledge is a super boring thing, but it's an important thing. But what's it mean? You can rest easy, monitor, find, and fix errors the first time. Now, through this whole sequence I did, the item on the right, that's the tagline off the website for each of these items. I didn't invent any of those. So the four I just showed you, that wasn't me coming up with that language. That's literally the slug on the website for the product. So that's what their marketing team came up with. And for each of those applications, you've not onboarded a user until they experience that. That's what you're driving towards. So the question is then, for a new user, what's between them and that, whatever that is for your application? Which means you need to know what it is. And if you don't, and I meet a lot of teams that don't know, they can tell you chapter and verse about technically what their software does, but they don't know why it matters really to an end user that it does that thing. And if we don't know why it matters, it's really hard to understand how to chart an onboarding path for that user that's going to result in them wanting to use your system and coming back again, time and time again. Now, I love to learn things through a practical example, so let's make an app. And a technique I like to think about with onboarding is, like our video game, let's assume that we have sort of a life bar with the user. You know, when the user first decides they want to try out our application, they have a certain amount of effort and willingness that they're willing to put into that. If they didn't have that initial activation energy, they wouldn't even start the process. There's something that had them decide, like, okay, sure, why not? Let's give this a go. And that's your initial sort of life that you're working with. And the trick of it is, you need to get them through the onboarding process without exhausting them all the way. If you do, they leave. Your character dies. So let's do an app. So our cool marketing team has come up with an app called Whiffle, whiff.le. It's really important to them that it's always done with the .le, because you know marketing teams, they really want to make sure that you are on brand all the time. So our new app's called Whiffle. And you've seen our ads for Whiffle. You're finally clicked on one of them and said, you know what, fine, I'm going to give this thing a try. Let's do this thing. I've got a certain amount of trust in you because I'm willing to actually even start this process. So start off with a little bit. Now, the first time when you click this button, let's do this, let's join Whiffle, I ask you for your entire demographic pile. I want to know your honorific, your three-part name, your birth date, favorite pet, hometown, and who you think the best Doctor Who villain was. Weeping Angels is the only correct answer, by the way.
That is correct.
That's correct. I will also accept Tom Baker era Cyberman, but not the modern Cyberman. So I asked for all this and I want an avatar. If you see this screen, though, where you've literally clicked one button, I've now asked you for the world, unless the button was join the FBI now, you're unlikely to think that this is reasonable to provide this much information right away. And in fact, yep, we died. We exhausted their trust in one go because we asked way too much stuff before we gave them any value. All right, let's try a different approach. What is the smallest amount of information we can ask to get them whiffling? Well, you know what? How about just give us your name however you want to, and a valid email address, and then we'll let you start whiffling. And because I want to even avoid having a checkbox, but Google makes me have a terms and conditions use approval within 2 clicks of anything I run an ad on. I've got this little sneaky, by clicking this button, you agree you're over 16 years of age and agree to our spiffy terms and conditions of use. So I've really minimized the form here. I just need a display name and an email address. Okay, fine. I'm willing to do that. After all, I clicked on the first let's do this button. I figured I was going to give up something. So that's fine. I'll click that. I will give you that information. It's still going to cost you a little bit of trust, though. That wasn't free. But we're not dead yet. It's okay. All right? Now, of course, we don't trust your email address. We want you to confirm your WIF identity. We send you a special code, your email address. We want you to dig out that 10-digit code to confirm your WIF ID. Users are not totally unused to this, particularly for corporate level services. They will not worry about this at all, generally. But it's still going to cost you a bit. And now we're in danger territory. We're not dead, but we're hurting a bit because this is annoying. But fine, we'll go into our email box, we'll go dig it out. We will go ahead and get that 10-digit code and validate that email address. But unfortunately, not our marketing team, but our investors are really worried that they want to make sure that our numbers are accurate. They want to make sure we're not getting any bots signing up. So they insisted we put a bot captcha on there as well. And now we're kind of in trouble because our bot captcha that we got out of Google wants us to identify all of the visual elements with waffles in it before we can set up our wiffle, make sure that we're a person. At this point, basically, the user said, I'm done with you. It's been too long. You've asked me too much, made me do too many things, and you have not given me any value. I'm out. And it's a good example of, like, bots are a really good example of something where, do you really have to filter them out? And it's a question you should challenge yourself, even with like the email validation thing. What if you get a bad email address? What's the downside consequence of that? Could you validate it later in the process once you've had a chance to maybe build up some value in the perceived eyes of the customer? Or not? If it's a bot, does it really matter? Maybe you identify that they're a bot by other actions. Can you just segregate them after the fact? So you never risk putting a person through that bot detection. You have to ask yourself how much is it worth, because depending on your market, you may lose a lot of people with those steps. And there's some ways around. Now, this email one, I'm going to back up a second on the email one. One of the things that we do that's a little interesting is we have some ways of scoring the email address on our actual application, which I'll show you a little later. And we use that to control what we then do. To, again, try to minimize how much we challenge them on it. But we don't want to die. Fortunately, it's just like a video game, right? So we respond. The next new potential user comes in and gives another shot to try out our onboarding process. So fine, we don't actually do that. We let them get into the application. So now they're in the first page of the application, and they haven't done anything yet. But we didn't, and we couldn't bring ourselves to show them a blank page. So what do? Well, we said, hey, you haven't whiffled yet. And oh yeah, we have a new affiliation with Facebook, so we want to connect up to your Facebook. So give Whiffle your Facebook friends so we can get them whiffling with you. We want your username and password. Okay. And not unsurprisingly, we've died again. We died again for 2 reasons. I've not left the user with, I basically admonished them in the first thing I did, and then I asked for something that they consider fairly privileged information, without enough context on why they would do it. So that's a bad step. I highlight this though because the number of times I see developers create an application where the first time you use it, you see an all but blank screen, happens a lot. And then you say, like, you can't just show a blank screen. The first thought a developer has is to do something like this. You haven't done anything yet. Or this, something like that comes across almost as admonishing the user for being new.
You have no friends.
You have no friends. Now, this may be shocking, but it turns out people do not respond highly positively to that. So let's look at something better. Instead of dying, we respond again. And now when we got through the first stage, we're really hoping for a save point, this application is something, right? But now we went through the sequence again, we got to this. The first opening screen that did well. What does this do well? Well, a couple things. First off, Tom will say, welcome to Whiffle. It turns out, as crazy as it is, people love being thanked and congratulated. Love it. Particularly if you do it to them using a personal part of their name, like just their first name in most Western cultures, although that's going to get dicey. Why they just feel emotionally great when you thank them. Even if you literally say, like, congratulations for navigating our Byzantine process and actually managing to create your Wiffle account. They love it. They love being thanked, welcomed, congratulated. It gives you some credibility back. So you shouldn't think it mattered, but people are emotional creatures, and it does hit. But now for a little bit of more science. There's some basic rules that go on here. One is that you want to have one key thing that you're asking a user to do when they start with their app. Just like in the game where they gave us one button to press. They just want us to max speed. Remember, the first thing they want to do is max speed with the other rider. They give us one thing to do. You need to have one dominant thing you're asking your user to do first. That's the core thing. Now, like any, and by the way, you need to communicate it to them in terms of the value that they will get for it, not the technical step it is. Because remember, our goal of onboarding them is to get them to experience that, that change in their life that our product can create, not achieve a technical step or run a particular gauntlet. So, like any startup, what's the difference we're going to make in your life? Well, we're going to enrich your life and the world around you. I mean, that's what startups do, right? So that's what you get for starting your own Wiffle, and that's the big action we want you to take. That's the dominant action. Now, there's something called the rule of threes, which basically is that people will pick between up to 3 options pretty well. But if you go over that, they tend to add one extra option, which is do nothing. Close the browser and go home. And this is well understood in product psychology. It's not an accident that, for example, if you go to most car manufacturers and look at the way they have their vehicles set up, they will offer you, for example, here are the 3 models of the Honda Accord. Okay, you've picked the model, cool. Here are the 2 trim lines that you can 2 option packages you can optionally add to it. And then once you pick that, okay, there's additional little choices you can make. People do well picking through basically 3 core options. So what that means is that, like in the moment, this is the dominant thing we want them to do. But if for some reason this doesn't fit them, if our team says, hey, you know what, there's these 2 other scenarios that are pretty common, you can put them up there as long as you limit yourself to a total of basically 3. But also, you make it clear which one's the most likely. So in this case, we really want you to start your own Wiffle. But if that's not you, we want you to know 14 people near you are Wiffling, and you can join their Wiffle. Maybe you want to observe before you start your own. Okay, cool. It's an option that's right there. Now, at the same time, we've shown a different way to roll in the 2 things we skipped over in the onboarding process. The first one is, remember we had that first screen where we asked a ton of questions, and then we got rid of all the questions and boiled it down to just name and email? Okay, but now we can make up for that. Let's do a little gamification. We say, here, your profile is 35% complete. Add a picture to personalize your Wiffle. That will work a lot. It works for 2 reasons. One is that there's a lot of people that when they see, like, I'm at 35%, their first question is what?
How do I get to 100?
How do I get to 100? Am I going to get to 100? Can I at least get to 50? Right? And what's the next thing I can do? And so we say, hey, add a picture to personalize this. We're not just telling them, here, add a picture. We're not giving them a random thing like add your profile. We're giving them something specific. Hey, if you just add a picture, just give me one thing. Why would you do that? Because it personalizes your Wiffle. So again, we're coupling action to value. But it's an ancillary thing. We don't have to have that. So it's our tertiary option, basically. It's up here in the corner. It's smaller. It's off to the side. And we've done a little bit of gamification to incentivize it, but it's not calling itself too much. Then finally, we snuck in our little Facebook thing here. Why? We say, well, hey, if you want to Wiffle with friends, you can invite new Wifflers from Facebook. I can have that same username and password dialog right behind this button, and now it won't be a problem. And the reason is, if I click on something that says invite people from Facebook, I'm not at all going to be surprised when I get asked for my Facebook creds. That will be non-shocking. I may not want to do it still, but I'm not going to be surprised. So with this, what we've done, we've thanked them to build back, to make them feel happy. We've really focused on the one thing we really want them to do, and then given them a particular secondary choice that is the other most likely thing. And the rest of it's basically, made small and made to look small and just be kind of offset things if they're looking for another excuse. And from that, we can actually gain a bit of credibility with the user. But you go too far with this. So, the initial blank screen was bad, and we just said, you've not done anything, that's bad. Here we've done this, it's a little bit minimalistic, it's not too much on it, and your team's gonna get tempted, right? They're gonna get tempted to start cramming more stuff in there. So what do? Well, you know what? Here's now we've added all the stuff in. We've got extra stuff. Did you know we have a brand new app in the App Store? So our adoption team really wants you to know that. So you're using the web UI, we want you to whiffle while you walk, and to do that, you need to download our app in the App Store. We also have our annual convention, the Wiffle Ball. It's coming up in only 4 weeks. We'd like you to be able to get your tickets for that. And you can still do the other. Oh, and we just got a new partnership with Spotify, so you can whiffle a happy tune like with Spotify. The problem you have now, if this is your first screen, is we've broken the rule of threes. You do not know what's the thing you should do. So, yeah, that hurts. We're back in the world where they're most likely just close the browser and say, screw this, I'm not sure what to do. And if you think about it, for example, there's no reason to show a brand new user this invite, even though you're showing it to every other continuing user on your site. This is something that's trying to take someone from basic to expert, or basic to proficient to expert, right? This is trying to move them up the ladder, but this person's just getting started. That option's not for them. And yeah, I get it, you just shipped a great new app to the App Store, but maybe you don't do this unless you're watching them doing it from a phone after they've done their first little bits of interaction with it. People will go hunting for apps and app stores eventually if they like your thing enough. And earning a spot as a download installed app for a site is actually, that's another level of engagement, and that may be too big an ask this early in the process. But it's really not the most important thing that you want to do because this doesn't really increase your stickiness. You need them to engage with your app to get to that initial moment of satisfaction, the initial benefit. And to do that, this is the thing you've determined is the most important thing. So if that's the thing you need them to do, don't keep giving them other things to do that aren't that. Push them to do the thing you want them to do. All right. So in summary for this, key tips. Avoid a big empty screen with no guidance on the most important thing to do next. This does mean in your team having a set of discussions around what is the most important first thing to do. And if there's a great scenario where they shouldn't or can't do that thing, what's the other one? And can you tell the difference between the two of them? Avoid custom initial wizards for common features and instead get them to use the real UI. You notice the video game didn't send you off to learn in some paddock with a horse. They had you learn in the game context in the snowstorm. And just for the same reasons, if someone logs into your app for the first time and you were, say, for example, to give them an entirely different UI to do their first interaction, you haven't taught them how to use your app. So while technically you might have a great benchmark of, oh yes, from the goal standpoint of can we get them to onboard and send their first whiffle, you might get a great metric for your investors, but you're not improving your actual user engagement and your true level of engagement with the user because you haven't taught them how to use your app routinely. And as something of a clue, if it's too hard to guide people that direction, you may have a problem, right, in the flow of your application. So avoid custom initial wizards. Now there's an exception for that, which is literally something that the user would only ever have to do once, right? So that the first time they go into this, they're setting up a new project, so you have to do these things, and after you set up the project, we will never ask you these things again. Well, that's part of the sort of really that initial onboarding sequence. It's not part of the initial experience once they're in the app. So something great for teams, consider an invite system for the rest of the team. An easy way, if someone gets in there and realizes that they can't take the step you're asking, give them a really easy way to ask someone else to take that step. So for example, if you have a DevOps tool, it could be that the manager of the team decides we need a CI to CD system. They go sign up for Azure DevOps. They get in there first time and realize like, oh my gosh, it wants me to set up a build or it wants me to transfer our source code in here. I don't actually even know where the source code is stored. Okay, fine, that's not a knock on them. make it really easy for them to invite Jane, who knows exactly where all the source code is stored, and get Jane to know why she did the invite. So that means, like, don't just actually add Jane. Jane needs to get an email that says, Bob has invited you to Azure DevOps for this project to help, set up your team. Click here to learn more about Azure DevOps. Click here to, complete setting up your user, something like that, so that Jane wants to come help out. So consider some sort of customized invite system for the rest of the team. And have something else then for that manager or other who's out of band to do who can't complete that core path. So if I'm the manager, I'm interested in Azure DevOps, I sign my team up, I look and realize I can't take any of the next steps. I need Jane to do it, she leads the team. Okay, cool. But a crazy number of people will never come back to a SaaS system after that first initial experience. And so to improve your odds, you really want to get the most you can of engagement with that manager, whoever that individual is, before they leave your app the first time. So why not offer them a video or some training or something else that helps them understand the value of your product or the unique way it works or how an evaluation should go or something that gives them something to increase their level of engagement with you and get them down the road to getting that value out of your product, even if they can't advance the ball on the core goal that you're trying to accomplish. So that's basics of onboarding. We did this through a sort of a fictitious made-up app. And yes, people have asked me before, when we came up with this slide deck, I desperately wanted to actually go out and create a real site called Wiffle just to see how far I could go with this. But it turns out there is no LE top-level domain. And as much as I will go pretty far for a good joke, I will not go to the level that pays for a top-level domain. My wife would not look kindly on that. So let's look at something real. So here's a real example. This is actually from our Loop product for how we sequence the onboarding and why. And this represents the state of it as about 6 months ago. So if you were to go through the process today, it would look a little different. And I'll talk a bit more about that as we go through. So real actual product with real actual numbers and work behind it. So this is our home screen. Remember, I said that tagline I talked about the value of the product was right off the websites, and there's ours. Rest easy with Loop, monitor, find, and fix errors in .NET applications for the first time. So that's what you see on our homepage. And these are actually this obviously, as with all marketing pages, marketing teams can't resist. They change them all the time. But that tagline's still there. There's still a big old try it button, and you say, fine, Mr. Software Guy, I'm willing to give your system a shot. Onboard me. Boom. Wow, that is not going to show on the screen. Wonder. All right, I can make this work. So one of the first things we do actually is we strip away a ton of the Chrome. And as development team, we're all like, what do you mean? You can't take out the menus and the footer and everything? Isn't that going to confuse users that the whole look totally changes? And in fact, no. The reality of it is that once we start in this process, number one, we really don't want them to get distracted by clicking around to the buy page or something like that or somewhere else in the app structure. We really highlight you just in on this part, which says, Loop, let's get started. We want your email address. Oh, by the way, here's a link for our terms of service. But the email address is the big thing we need. Because everything associates with that. It's a bit like you want to go along with any Microsoft service. What's the first thing it wants to know? What's your email address? Boom. Now, we did do some numbers on why were people bailing out of the process. And one of the things we found was that we have a client that you can download and install. A lot of people were going to the try it now button because it's the biggest button on the marketing site just to get the download. And they were going halfway or partway through the trial process or all the way through the trial process just to get the download, which is a total waste. So we put a download link. It says download Loop instead right here. It was meritorious enough, and we monitor how many times it gets clicked to make sure it's still earning its spot on the page there every day. And we've done the same terms of service thing. This is the minimalistic thing to let Google let us run any ads at all. Is we have the terms of service right there, and no real checkboxes. We have to confirm later. And this isn't next. This is again, it's try loop. It's expressed in terms of the thing we want you to do. But we do a little bit of a trick. You enter your email address. Because we haven't asked me anything else yet. When you move to click the try loop button, what we actually do is run back and bounce your email address off of our system and a number of other things to figure out what we know about you. Now, depending on what you put in here, this said whiffle at ipota.com, if one of the things we get is people that are already running a trial will come back and sign up come back to the trial again because they're not quite sure where they ended up, they just know where they started the journey from. So if you put an email address, you already have a trial done, as soon as you put this and click that try loop button, we go and send you back off to your application, off into your trial. If you actually have our on-prem version, not trial, we question you, basically, don't you want to download it instead? But if the email address doesn't have an account with us, doesn't have an active, you aren't an active customer, you are not an active trial, we score it using a system called Clearbit Risk. So this is a little interesting. It's a service where you can submit an email address and options some other information, and they'll tell you a ton about that email address. They'll let you know if it's a disposable email address. So folks familiar with mailinator.com, things like that you use to get disposable email addresses. They'll tell you if it's disposable, tell you if it's free, tell you if it's a corporate email address. Because just because it's free doesn't mean it's not a company address. Right? Companies will have a gmail.com or an outlook.com email address. That happens. So it'll tell you those things. It also tells you a probability of fraud risk. And that's done through a whole complicated system this company has for measuring that. What we do is we look at this, and there's couple other aspects of that, and decide what to do next. And one key thing we're trying to decide is, one, should we let you proceed with the email address at all? And two, do we need you to validate this email address right away? So we won't let you proceed with a disposable email address for a very simple reason that we know that we've never closed a sale, ever, not once, to somebody who started off with so little trust in us, they were giving us a disposable email address. Now, we don't just bounce you out, though. We now know why we're rejecting you, so we say a very nice message. We actually say, I'm sorry, we need a real email address to sign up for this service. We understand nobody likes spam. We basically, summarize this communication we do from this email address once you give it to us. If you're not comfortable with that, it's not a problem. Here's some links. Here's a couple of links to great material to read about Loop and some videos to see Loop in action to help you decide if you're ready to start a trial. And we look at the percentage of people that either then fill in a real email address or click one of those links. And between the two of them, we get almost 100%. And I feel pretty good with that. Because if you weren't comfortable enough with our product, we pushed you to, the one option we gave you on the main website, right, was try our product. If you click that button, but you're really not totally comfortable with that, and you didn't want to give us a real email address, no problem. Let me raise your comfort, let me raise your trust level before we get going, instead of losing you in the process. Now, if we get back a company address, we have nothing that looks to us to say, like, basically, how big a company is this? If the company's big enough, we do an email validation. If it's small enough, we don't. For a simple reason that basically, if this is a real email address, and it's a company email address, for the most part, I'm like, that's fine. I'm gonna trust you entered it right. If not, you'll kind of get fixed here in a minute anyway. But it's good enough. The reason we force validation for bigger email addresses is kind of relatively simple. I don't want anyone going into our system and signing up as Scott Hanselman at Microsoft.com except Scott Hanselman or one of his entourage that has access to his mailbox. But I want it to be someone who actually has access to that if they're a big enough company, so we're sure who it is. But if you're small, if you're basically below a certain size company in terms of feedback we get, and they're validating that by looking at the domain names and things like that, then that's fine. I'm willing to take that risk, and I'd rather not introduce the speed bump. But let's say you put in, basically anybody at Microsoft.com. I guarantee you that's going to trigger the process. We're going to say, no, we really want to know who it is. Then, okay, we shoot you an email address to get your validation code. Well, we do a couple of things to smooth this out. What this reads up here on the screen says, hey, to confirm your identity, we sent a code to, and we bold the email address to call it out to your eyes. We repeat it again down here, email address, there it is, and we have a change button next to it. Because what totally happens when someone doesn't see that email right away, they go like, huh, you send you an email address, I don't see it. What's the first thing they do? Check their spam folder.
Yeah.
Nope, still don't see it. Then they go back and they'll look to see like, wait a minute, where did I send that? At this point, if it's wrong, they'll go like, I misspelled that. Oops. And if they misspelled the domain, we probably would have already caught it because they probably didn't hit another corporate domain. But if not, fine, then they'll have the change button to let them fix it. Otherwise, they paste in the code. Now, we send them an email. Oh, yeah, of course, give them a button to resend the code. That's really important. You want to implement that. We send them an email that is pure text. There isn't a link in it. Now, you're saying, well, but Kendall, that's a shot of Outlook, and I see 2 links. Yes, Outlook automatically makes things that look like email addresses links, but we didn't do that. And by doing it in plain text, interestingly enough, it's virtually never going to be considered spam. Because virtually all spam filters basically say, spam requires you to try to take an action. The whole point of spam is to get the person to take an action they didn't want. And that pretty much requires some form of link, or thing that looks like a web address, even if it's not encoded as a link. And we know. We put the code big, visually separated, and clear. And if you copy this, we basically make it so that our input box there is super tolerant. You can paste us this entire email or any subpart of it in that text box, and we will take it. Because we basically take the text you paste, pass it to the back end, and it just looks to see is the code I'm looking for contained in that thing. I don't care where. Because this isn't NASA launch codes. We just want a minimal amount of evidence that like you gave us a valid email address and it's really you. And that's all we're trying to do. So, all right. So we did that. We now ask you now that we know really it's you, we ask you for your password. And we have a little subscribe box here. I'd like to be notified of what's the exact text? Can't read it on that part of the screen. I'd like to be notified of new releases and other important announcements from Gibraltar Software. So that's our, opt-in. They used to be checked by default. It's no longer checked by default because of GDPR. Because we do about 55% of our business outside the US, about 40% of it in the EU. So it's just easier for us to comply than not. And we ask for your password. This sequencing is important in that we've done something to confirm this is who you are. Now we ask for your password, which is e-signature establishing your mark. And then when you click next, cool. Now we ask you for your name. This is something that we didn't used to display this section down here. We just had, hey, we'd like your first and last name. We now actually display this blocks down here. And this gets back to that thing where people, remember I said people like to be thanked and congratulated? They also love to see their name. But they don't equate to putting it in text boxes as seeing it. When we did it, so as you fill this in, it fills in your badge. And by the way, like we put an avatar here. We take this guy and bounce against Gravatar and one of their services. If we find your picture, we put that picture right here. And we say this is how your display name is shown in Loop. It turns out that if you show things in context and show people a badge like their name, they're way, way less likely to just as-diff through that form. They like to see their name. They like to be recognized, thanked, and congratulated. And this is a way of recognizing. So our rate of getting crappy inputs in there went way down, which our marketing team loves, because what are they really doing behind the scenes? They're taking that email address, they're taking these 2 fields, and you betcha this person's going to get some basic adoption onboarding marketing email communication.
Spam.
Technically not. Technically not spam, because right here we have text that reads, as part of your trial, text can't read on the screen there. As part of your trial, we'll send you some helpful information about how to use Loop and what your options are to keep using Loop after your trial ends. You can opt out of these messages at any time. So we have gotten your express permission right here to send you those messages. GDPR compliant. And we make sure the messages really are about this thing, which is everything you have to do. So European regulation, it will eventually become a US regulation. And you know what? It really is a good thing. It means you can't just capture someone's email address for some random thing and just keep pounding them with stuff for other things. So, all right. Then finally, we basically are asking them we verify the service name that we want them to use. So we auto-generate this, again, from their domain information. So we take a guess. Because again, if you've given us a corporate email address with the corporate domain name, then we get from DNS the actual corporate registration, and from that, we can run a fairly quick algorithm to come up with a probable good service name, which we default in here. But you can modify it. This is mostly here because changing this after the fact is a pain in the butt, and that will show to the customer. So we want to kind of get that right to begin with. And then this is our actual, essentially, e-signature of the terms and conditions of use. This is e-signature compliant because it is after you established your mark and your identity, and we verified it. Now we're asking you to basically say, yes, I've signed my terms and I'm signing up for this thing. So, boom, do that. It goes off and creates. Now, here's where things have changed. We're at this moment going off and provisioning an actual service for that. So we are creating a SQL database. We're blowing in some additional user creds, some additional stuff like that. We're provisioning some back-end stuff. This takes between 5 and 10, 15 seconds to do. We don't want the app to just stall when it's doing that, so we put up a page. Initially, we just put up a page that says, hey, your service is being created. This may take a few moments, and put a little non-deterministic little progress section here. And then our marketing team got clever and said, well, while we're waiting on that, why don't we show them some information about how their trial is going to work? And so we actually created a visual sequence down here for step-by-step basically 5 steps about what a good trial looks like of our product with a description. The irony of having done that is that, because the sequence through and basically says, okay, so first you need to do this, then you're going to want to try out this, then hey, here's where you get real value out of the product. The irony of having done that is that we used to, as soon as the service was created, throw them right into the service. Once we started putting this up here, we actually get complaints from initial users saying, hey, I was reading that, and you just worked me out of it. Come on, man. So now, once the service is all set up, we just changed about the progress bar for a big go to our service button. This is the thing we changed. And what we did was, we no longer provision any services when you initially create your trial. Because we technically don't need any of that. We don't need SQL database, don't need the spot in Azure Blob Storage or any of that stuff until you send us the first bit of data. So we kick that out of the process, and we no longer have this screen at all. And in fact, we're talking now about bouncing out the email validation as well, all the way back to here, or back to basically inside the app. Because if we're not provisioning anything, how badly do we really care if someone says, we're debating on this, and the real risk comes down, it's the Scott Hanselman scenario, is the thing we always talk about, is what if someone signs up somebody notable, Trump at whitehouse.gov for our service, and we start automatically generating marketing email, and it's not actually them. That's our big fear. So, we're wrestling with that. But this we actually changed out by rewriting our entire provisioning infrastructure, so it no longer makes those databases when it initially sets up the system, but instead waits for when the first data comes in. This then gets to our blank page problem. How do we solve our blank page problem? Well, the thing we need you to do, so Loop is an APM system. So the thing we have to get you to do is connect up your application to Loop. Without that, we're dead. You'll never get any value out of the platform if you can't do that. But what do you have to do that? Well, it's none different than Azure Microsoft App Insights. You need to add a module to your application, you need to rebuild your application, and you need to run it. Now, what we do was, we broke that down into steps, and in essence, any of the options you pick here, basically the top of the options you pick, we're just going to keep showing you this instead of a blank page of, hey, you need to add the Loop agent. Now, it's not showing on the screen, is there's basically technology-specific tabs there. So for each of the things we support, each of the frameworks we support, there's a very specific option where you basically say, literally, here's exactly the thing you need to do. If there's any code, here's exactly the code If there's any configuration, we give you exactly, like on the configuration tab, here's the exact literal configuration tab to talk to your service. Now, we know about 30% of the people that get to this screen basically go, oh. They don't know how to build their, they don't know how to take their app and build it, basically, and run it. And that's fine. Like, I get that. I mean, there are tech leads on projects that can't do that because they're high enough up in a project that modifying it and getting it to start up is a big enough deal they don't know how to do it. Okay, fine. We have a wonderful invite a user option right there. And if you sit on the screen for long enough, it's like if you basically sit on the screen, don't click any of these options for more than about, I think it's like 2 minutes, we actually roll in a little message box right here of like, would you like to get some help? You can request it from us, maybe invite a user. If you click on one of these other tabs here where we have functionality, you see a marketing message, if you will, about that piece of functionality. What does it do? When you click on events, you hear about how we track unique errors in your application. You have a link to watch a video. That's how we're letting a manager who decides they can't do the thing we need them to do to onboard into the system, to give them something else to do to increase their engagement with us. If they do an invite, they just have to put an email address in, and then this person gets a wonderfully tailored email that says, basically, whoever this person was has asked you to help them set up Loop for your team. And we give them a little bit of information about Loop, what it is, and click link to find out more about Loop, link to complete setting up your account, and help Bob set up Loop. Click. When they click the button, help Bob set up Loop, they get shown a screen that asks them for, hey, can you give us your full name? Can you set a password? And then they see basically this screen. So hopefully they can get in there. And if not, we set them up as an admin as initial invite so they can then invite a user. So the chain of invite can continue if this needs to roll down. And I laugh about it, but we've seen that happen. We've seen it go like 3 levels deep in our telemetry, and then someone finally like, yeah, okay, I can do that. And then they build an app and run it, and then everyone sees the data. So it's a little comical. But we one of the key bits of this is we have telemetry to guide us on what's, so we can score how well it went and what happened. To help us make informed decisions from data, not just guesses. But often as not, you see data and you have to guess why the data is the data. Like, we know we're losing people, why might we be losing the people? Well, after a lot of thought, we think it's these top 3 scenarios. Okay, if those are the case, what can we do? Let's try and experiment, do those things and see if it changes the numbers. Now, once you send us data, though, you're not on board the application. Remember, that's the first thing we need you to do, but we haven't gotten to the point where you really feel valued yet. So one of the things we do is that without you even, basically you can just be on this screen where it's asking you to add data. Your whole team could be because you invited everybody. The instant data comes in, we have an open connection to the back end. We're checking. Within about 2 seconds when data comes in, all of a sudden the screen will change. The instructions go away, and we start telling you about the application you sent data for. In particular, we'll tell you how many unique problems we found in it that you should review. We'll show you the most recent ones that came in. And we start giving you the next most important thing that you should look at. So show value right away, like try to increase their engagement with us right away and give something. We've made the biggest ask ever, right? If you're a product company, you ask someone to modify their application and build it, there's no higher ask, basically. If they've achieved that, we want to rebuild some trust. So we try to show them data right away from their information, but then help them understand what's the next action they can take to increase the value they're getting out of the platform. And this stays around. So they might come back through the course of the trial like 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Every time they come to this page, we're checking from our list, basically, what's the next most important thing that they should do. Once they do that one, we have a different one. And we basically have a couple of these. I think we have 4. And once they sequence through all of them, they go away. They're actually still here under quick help. Someone went looking for them, but they go away. So we're escorting them through the onboarding process, not by providing them an alternate wizard or UI, but instead providing a description of why they want to do the next important thing we think is important, and at best, a link to kick them into that, like basically, they click that and it highlights and shows them where that nav option is to get them into the section we want them to go. So they learn where it is, know the right terminology, and interact with that part of the system. So we're teaching them that, sort of just in time, teaching them how to use the application as they go. Just the one most next important thing. And we don't do that on every screen. We do that only on a couple select screens so that we're not having this, so that they won't think of this information as badgering them. You know, like, I know you keep thinking I should do this thing, and I want to do that thing. Then there is a button they can click. If they close it, it will go away for a period of time before it comes back and prompts them again, like, you should do this thing. We're not kidding. So, now finally, again, people love being thanked and congratulated. Of course, about 5 minutes after they sign up for their trial, assuming that they haven't left the site, they get an email from me through our marketing automation platform that gives them some great links and is that first experience of that initial email. So you can see here how we apply each of the lessons that I talked about in the theoretical app into a real-world app. But one of the most important aspects is we revisit this about every 6 months. We tried to do more often, and it wasn't actually as effective. So we do about every 6 months. And the reason is, at about 6 months, the team forgets the hard-fought reason why something had to be on the screen, which makes it easier if they walk through the process to think of it fresh again. Like, they'll look at it and go like, but why are we asking for the email address there? Could we not do that? Or why are we asking for first and last name? Could we just ask for the display name? That's a fight we've had and gone back and forth. Because Loop, for example, the product, just uses a single name field for a name. It doesn't use first and last. And but the marketing team has gone to a ton of marketing seminars that tell them that emails that are customized with your first name get much higher click rates. So they really want that first name. I'm pretty sure the next time you go through, they're going to lose that argument. I'm going to ask them to put up and show me the numbers or something. Because I don't like that we're asking the two fields. I'd rather we ask one. And a major reason for that, by the way, is again, we have significant international customers. Not everyone follows the Western first name, last name convention. Or if they do have a names that are in that order, the first name is not always what in the role that we think of first name as being. And so you're making some culture assumptions there that aren't awesome when you pull it that way. So we revisit this every 6 months and make changes every time, both from looking at the experience and just saying if we did this ourselves, how would we feel about it, and looking at the telemetry we gather on every step of the way through that process of where does it seem to be working and not working and failing. So now we've been talking about onboarding a team as in like this is a person or a team's whole initial experience with the system. How do you handle that? So we had to deal with not just getting you in, but teach you our nomenclature and get you to upload some data and do a whole bunch of things like that. But that's not the only onboarding experience you have. The other onboarding experience that's an issue is the new user experience. So imagine for a minute that you have a system that's been set up for a long time, it's been running for a while, but Bill joins the team. What's Bill's experience going to look like? Now remember, Bill came from outside. Bill might be used to two totally different products that do this, what this thing does. And so Bill is used to things being a different way and working a different way. And again, we don't want Bill to have that experience of like coming in and just being like, here you go, man. You're in. It's all empty. We want Bill to have a good initial experience and bring Bill into the system. I've seen scenarios where developers first, once it's up and running, it has lots of data in it. And what got us to really thinking about this was I literally observed in the usability test, this gal got a notification from the system that she had an issue to look at, clicked the link to follow it in the system. It immediately threw up a screen and showed her everything there was to know about this error that's been happening in production. She squeaked like a mouse, closed the browser window, and responded back, is there another way I can get the information to her team? That was not her fault. Right? That was our fault. because we so went counter to that user's expectations when they went to access the system that they took really the hard way, which is to ask for help instead of using the information that was presented to them. So we did some real work after that. So one of the things that we do in Loop, because this initial screen is highly tailored to we call it your loop, so it's to your experience. If you're a new team member, you may have nothing assigned to you yet. You've never. There's no recent apps. There's nothing you've opened up. But we don't want it to be blank. We don't want to have boring, like pointless stuff in it either. Okay, fine. So what the first things we do say is, hey, no recent applications. Let's pick some favorites. As new applications appear, you can select which ones we summarize on this dashboard, and then pick some favorite applications. We're basically giving them guidance to kick them right into the process where we want them to go and get them going in the situation. So they don't have the blank screen problem where they just have no idea what to do and where to go. Likewise, though, this is the redesign of the screen that caused the dreaded close. What we did was we actually pulled out a ton of the information on the screen, added a lot of white space, and kicked some details and secondary tabs and the like. We basically broke the rule of like, you've probably heard the rule like all this information will be available within 2 clicks or something like that. Yeah, that's not a real usability thing. We removed a lot of ancillary information that looked pretty, but wasn't essential to other tabs. So for example, you want to know the statistical distribution of this error, how often it's been happening. We had a cutesy color chart for it, but it's a very loud visual thing when you first come into the page. If your developer assigned this problem to fix it, you really don't care what the distribution is. The big thing you care about is so this is something where we even bring, we'll bring it right up here. We tell you this exception happened while doing this. And then an extended set of detail down here if there's an actual exception, we're showing you literally essentially the core stack frame for the exception that matters down in the bottom. Didn't have a good screenshot for it. So that's the situation where we really put some time into re-optimizing this screen for that first user experience and challenge things, basically make things earn their way onto the first page of it instead of putting everything on the screen. Because we want users to want to use the system. We don't want to just bury them with data. Our job is to figure out what's important while making sure they can find everything they need to do. Finally, I want to talk to you a minute about bringing users back, because once so let's say you've had a great initial experience with the user, but once they close the browser window for one reason or another, even if they had a great experience, they're going back to their lives and all the things that they normally have going on. So you want to have ways to remind users of your system and get them to re-engage with you, depending on what they've done. So there's a couple of things you can do there. And I don't want to go in this real deep. But basically, for whatever reason, users are going to, particularly early on, they're going to close the browser and they're going to forget about you because you're not a part of their habit yet. You want to reach back out to them with valuable information in some sort of timely basis that gives them a reason to re-engage. Now remember, you might have this marketing email going out that's giving them generic information like, hey, here's some tips on how to use the system. It's been 3 days since I last emailed you, so let me email you a case study or something. But that doesn't really have the power of re-engagement. How about instead notify them when something happens that's important? So one of the things LinkedIn does that I think is super clever, right, is every once in a while I get out an email that says, hey, people are looking at you. Now, that's really tempting to go back and it's sort of like, I wonder why all of a sudden people are kind of like paying attention to me. Just a little something so for example, one of the things that we will do is if you set up a trial, basically after you've uploaded data for the first time and left the application, if you don't come back for 3 days, we then send you a summary of the errors we found. It's like, hey, here's a digest of the errors that we found in the application name of your application. see more in Loop, as a way to remind them of that. Or if they've been sending sessions, there's another variation that we do where we basically tell them, because we see these trials a lot, they'll engage with us a lot, then they'll forget about it, but they've left the app running with us, with our agent in it. So we're still collecting data, but nobody's looking at the data. When that starts happening, then we'll start sending them one basically like Monday morning about the weekend, over the the last 5 days or something like that. Here's what happened in the last 5 days of your application, and it's not all the information. The key bit is it's not all the information. It's a bit of a tease. So it's like there were 14 errors that happened in your application. Here's 2 of them. To see all of them, click here in Loop, which sends them into one particular page in Loop. Loop saw 2 new computers running your application for the first time. See which ones they are. So now, if you actually sign up in our app, you can sign up for digest and get the exact details just all sent to you, so that we're not always teasing you. But during the trial process, we do send a couple of these teases, if you will, because people get curious then, and then they want to come back and actually dig in to see, what was that thing, and try it out. So these little techniques work with the way people are. And you may think, but our customers are engineers. They're not going to fall for those tricks. Oh, I guarantee you they will. Engineers are people too. They will absolutely succumb to the same sort of human factor techniques that work with everybody. But it's intrigue them. Give them a reason to disrupt their current routine to add you into it, and thereby increase your engagement. All right, let's bring it home. So, number 1, success is defined by the change experienced by your users, not the technical steps you put them through. Those are the effort they're placing, not the value they're getting. You really want to know you need to know what that value is, or you don't know how to design an onboarding process because you don't know what the destination is. Focus on bringing users from wherever they are right now, which may be many places, to their first real success at achieving that value you identified. And where they are, you're inevitably replacing an existing system. And each user might have a different existing system. So you really need to have a good feel for what is the place they're coming from to then know what the route is going to be to the destination you need to get them to go to. You need to manage that trust budget like it's a video game. Screen by screen, interaction by interaction. Don't exceed the trust budget you've built with the user. If you do, they're not going to come back or they're not going to take that next step. One of the better ways to do that is not to focus too much on asking the fewest questions, but instead make sure that you are essentially making small asks and adding a little value as you go, or get them very invested before you make the big ask of them. But it's tricky. If you can't avoid the big ask, it's a real challenge. And for us, by the way, so we debate about that. Asking someone to install a library into their application and recompile it and run it to see value is a huge ask. So we debate things like, should we have samples up there which they can just see the data from? The problem we find is that people don't find, for logging and telemetry, people don't find canned examples to be compelling. What they find compelling is you seeing things in their application they didn't know were going on. That's what they find compelling. So we don't do any of those things. We've decided basically at the moment, we're hanging our hat on, we need you to add this agent. And we're not alone on that, by the way. We do periodically look at the onboarding process of some of our competitors and see what they're doing to see if they've made the same bets we have in terms of what people are willing to do. And that gets to the last point. Routinely review your initial user experience and that new person to team's experience as well. So that, and when I say routinely, pick a schedule for you. We do it every 6 months, more or less. Look at that experience again and say, how can we make this better? What can we eliminate? How can we streamline? What language could be improved? What telemetry have we got that can make this better? Now, an option to go deeper, if this talk has not made you decide that you should never want to hear about this topic ever again, there's some cool things you can do, but in particular, I would go to useronboard.com. Samuel Hewlett has done some really great walkthrough teardowns of onboarding experiences. We found this very helpful in designing our process. I highly recommend the Ashley Madison one in particular. It is a hoot. They do an American setup process. There's a number of really good ones in here where he walks through the initial onboarding experience for each of those things. And you can really start to see what works and what doesn't work. So, very much thank you. I really appreciate everybody being here tonight and making it out. And if you'd like to follow up with me, I'm on Twitter at Kendall Miller. But if you want to tell me about how this was a terrible waste of your time, do that via email, best, kendall@onloop.com. And I rave periodically on our blog, onloop.com/blog. Loop is our flagship product, and that's what pays to fly me around the country and waste your time. So, thank you.
Hey, if you've watched all the way to the end of this video, you're obviously a person that's passionate about developing good software for people. So let's summarize what we saw. We're trying to avoid being the best piece of software that nobody looks at. And so these are great principles we've seen to make the initial steps so obvious that people can't help but succeed. So this is a big part of the principalities of usability and how we design the first things that people see. So we want to move our customers from zero to a basic adoption, and then we've seen inside of how Gibraltar software looked at their process, and sometimes called a Byzantine process, of making a user jump through some hoops to get into the actual view so they can make a judgment to say, this is software that I need. So I hope that you've learned something that would apply to whatever program you're building. If you're into making software, I've got some other tutorials for you. You can learn how to program in C# and in Java and PHP. You can work with databases and other things that are related to technology. So subscribe to the channel and check out the hundreds of other videos that are here on YouTube.